Well, for more on the nutrition panel delay and a closer look at the sugar industry at large, I spoke with Dr. Robert Lustig. He's a professor of pediatrics at the University of California, San Francisco. I began by asking him what the odds are for the Trump administration to change their minds about delaying the labeling revamp.
Zero. Understand that President Trump has made it very clear that he is not in favor of regulation. He has never been in favor of regulation. I'm from New York City, and I have a long memory of all of the things that he didn't like about the regulations in New York City. The bottom line is there is no chance that the Trump administration will come around on this. The question is, will individual municipalities or individual states argue for changing labels? Now, there's a problem with that. It's called the Commerce Clause. And so things that are sold over borders can't have different kinds of labels. So there are limits to being able to do this. But within municipalities, at least things like nutrition labeling of on billboards or in restaurants themselves can occur.
Now, let's also look at the sugar lobby, obviously a very influential lobby. How valuable are they, and how much pressure could they potentially be putting on the FDA?
Well, they've put a tremendous amount of pressure on not just the FDA, but the USDA over many years. Now, there have been people who have called for cease and desist regarding the sugar lobby over many years. But in fact, we do a lot of business with respect to sugar, and the Trump administration is very tight with the Von Hool brothers, and that's one of the ways we get our sugars from the Dominican Republic. There's also been a trade deal with Mexico recently over sugar. So it's unlikely that the sugar lobby is going to be squelched anytime soon. They wield a tremendous amount of influence in Washington.
Now, something else that could bring influence is consumers. So what sort of progress are you seeing from consumer rights groups in this space, and perhaps how that could impact consumer buying habits?
Well, there is shall we say, a real food movement that is occurring throughout the United States, but it's particularly situated along the coasts. People are now very concerned about what they eat because of the impacts of food on diabetes, fatty liver disease, heart disease, cancer. So people are very concerned about what's going into their food. Processed food is on the outs at the moment. People are thinking about ways of reformulating. People are thinking about ways of being able to restructure the food supply to be able to provide people with real food. However, until the government deals with subsidies that promote processed foods such as corn, wheat, soy, and sugar, I don't anticipate that this problem is going to get any better anytime soon. Ultimately, we need a new food business model that rewards the food industry for doing the right thing instead of the wrong thing.
Now, looking at food manufacturers, one of the arguments they have against the proposed labeling is that it's too confusing for consumers. Do they have a point?
No, they're the ones who made the confusion. And part of the reason is because there are two definitions of sugar. There's blood sugar, like what you measure when you have diabetes, and then there's dietary sugar. Now, blood sugar is glucose, but dietary sugar is glucose and fructose, fructose being the sweet molecule in sugar, and fructose being the specific molecule that causes the damage. It causes fatty liver disease because it can only be metabolized by the liver, and when the liver's overwhelmed, it has no choice but to turn the excess into liver fat. Now, the food industry has sowed that confusion by comments like, we need sugar to live. Well, we need a blood glucose to live, that's true. But you get a blood glucose no matter what. The Inuit have no carbohydrate in their diet. They don't have any place to grow carbohydrate. They have ice. They have whale blubber, but they still have a blood glucose. The point is, you don't need dietary sugar to live. However, the food industry doesn't want you to know that. They also confuse dietary fat with body fat. And they say that fat makes you fat. Part of the reason we have this confusion is because the food industry has sown the confusion and now is trying to capitalize on that confusion. We're trying to undo the confusion. And one of the ways is by actually putting on the label what's in the food.
Now, we know that people are wanting to get more informed about what's in their food. So with that being said, could some of these companies who don't want to be proactive with this new labeling lose out to some of the companies who are really at the forefront of this?
Well, in fact, a lot of the new food companies, the startup food companies, are taking market share from the big guys. They're eating their lunch. And of course, the big food companies are recognizing this, and they're actually trying to buy them up. So there is very clearly an effort on the part of the big food companies to squelch this, because this is not good for them. And so by buying them up, they can basically, take them down. So this continues to be an issue within the U.S. Food sector in terms of what's hot and what's not.
Let's also look at, from an economic standpoint, let's look at the impact of some of these things on companies and also on the longer-term health benefits. We know that that's been weighing on the healthcare system. So what else could the deciding factors be from an economic standpoint that may perhaps tip the scale towards these new nutrition labels?
Well, I will be very honest with you. We have a healthcare crisis in America, and we also have a crisis of confidence in terms of healthcare. Here's the problem. Obamacare promised us that they could put 32 million sick people onto the rolls, and they would do it by providing preventative services. That is, you would not have to go to the emergency room. You could see your regular doctor, where things would be, say, 50 times cheaper. The problem is that after Obamacare was instituted, emergency room visits actually went up. And 3 of the healthcare companies actually opted out of Obamacare because of the increasing in prices. The bottom line is you can't fix healthcare until you fix health. And we haven't fixed health. And the problem is you can't fix health until you fix diet. And we haven't fixed diet. So until we start addressing this issue, and Obamacare, Trumpcare, and the new Senate version do not address diet in any way, shape, or form, so do not expect anything that's going on in Washington today to fix this problem.